The discovery of the Gospel of Judas is a long and convoluted story, and it's not really well documented. What we do know is that an Egyptian treasure hunter discovered the codex in the Minya province of Egypt, about 120 miles south of Cairo, sometime in the 1970s. In a cave, the treasure hunter supposedly found a limestone box containing several ancient documents, including the codex that contains the Gospel of Judas. These texts were eventually sold to an antiquities dealer in Cairo who goes by the name of Hana Asabo. He then turned around and tried to sell the text for the astronomical price of $3 million. However, after several years, he was not able to find a buyer, so in 1984 he smuggled the codex into the United States, and he stored it in all places in a safe deposit box in Long Island. Now, this proved to be a huge mistake. For anyone that knows the New York climate, it's not exactly the dry sands of Egypt. So after 16 years of being in the safe deposit box, the codex slowly started to disintegrate in the humidity of New York. Finally, another antiquities dealer, Frida Nussberger Chacos, bought the text in September 2000, who managed to get it to some real manuscript conservators. But by then, the gospel had sustained heavy damage. Scholars estimate that at least 10 or 15% of the gospel had been lost because of this mishandling. So after 30 years of bouncing between antiquities dealers and art conservators, finally National Geographic gained the rights to publish the codex, and in April of 2006 they published a translation and photographs of the gospel for the whole world to see. And finally, scholars could start analyzing one of the most important discoveries of early Christian history from the past century. Codex Chacos is about 16 by 29 centimeters and originally included 4 texts: the letter of Peter to Philip, the first apocalypse of James, the book of Allogenes, and the Gospel of Judas. It is written in Sahidic Coptic, an ancient Egyptian language that was spoken in the late Roman province of Egypt. Many of our other ancient Christian texts are written in Coptic too. Radiocarbon dating places the codex in the 3rd or 4th century, but if this gospel is the same gospel that Irenaeus talks about, then we might be dealing with a 3rd century copy of a 2nd century text. Maybe one that dates back to 150 CE, which makes it surprisingly early for a non-canonical gospel. Now, it's important to lay down some fundamental assumptions that may seem way too obvious to some of you. Judas Iscariot, the disciple of Jesus and the betrayer of Jesus according to the New Testament, did not write this text. Remember, it dates to at least 150 CE, which is a century after Jesus and his disciples would have lived. Nor does this gospel tell us anything about the historical Jesus. Remember, as a 2nd or 3rd century text, it tells us a lot about what 2nd and 3rd century Christians were thinking about, but doesn't tell us much at all about a 1st century rabbi living in the Roman province of Palestine. I would summarize the Gospel of Judas as a series of discussions between Jesus and his disciples, interspersed with more personal conversations between Judas and Jesus about cosmology, or the creation of the universe. Pay attention to 3 things: how the Gospel portrays the 12 disciples, the Gospel's mythology and theology, which is very different from Nicene Christianity, and how the Gospel portrays Judas himself. The Gospel begins with a discussion between Jesus and his disciples that portrays the 12 disciples in a very unfavorable light. The disciples are there worshiping together, it's implied they might be practicing the Eucharist together, and then Jesus walks over and starts laughing at them. And the disciples are confused. They're like, why is Jesus laughing at us? We're doing the right thing with our Eucharistic prayer. And Jesus responds, I am not laughing at you. You do not do this by your own will, but by this, your God will be worshipped. Your God? Wait, is Jesus implying that the 12 disciples are worshiping the wrong God? Well, naturally the 12 disciples are very confused by Jesus' comment. Teacher, are you not the Son of our God? To which he responds, truly I tell you, no generation will know me from the people who are among you. Pretty harsh words for supposedly the 12 most important men in early Christianity. Throughout the Gospel of Judas, the 12 disciples are portrayed as angry, ignorant, confused men who are blasphemous towards Jesus himself. Remember, we're talking about the 2nd and 3rd century here. Christianity was not yet a well-organized institution. Nicene Orthodoxy didn't yet exist in the form that we know it, and a lot of church leaders were claiming their authority stems from the 12 apostles themselves. Certain Christian groups might have had a lot to gain by attacking this authority, but Judas is different here. Among the disciples, only he knows the true nature of Jesus. None of the other disciples could stand before Jesus, but Judas was able to stand before him. Judas said to him, "I know who you are and whence you have come. You have come from the immortal realm of Barbelo, and he who sent you, I am not worthy to proclaim his name." Okay, this is where things get really confusing, so a little bit of background in Sethian Gnostic theology will help a lot. You see, many scholars classify the Gospel of Judas as a Sethian text, or sometimes a Sethian Gnostic text. Now, it's important to say that these categories, Sethian and Gnosticism, are extremely complicated and contested categories among academics. As I talk about in another video, Gnosticism is a modern category that scholars have used to try to classify certain Christian texts. We shouldn't think of Gnosticism and Sethianism as clearly defined religions in antiquity. No one in antiquity ever uses the word Gnosticism. No one in antiquity ever says, "I am part of a religion called Gnosticism." But I'm using the terms here to help draw out similarities between the Gospel of Judas and some other texts that scholars have classified as Gnostic or Sethian, such as the Apocalypse of Adam, the Apocryphon of John, the Coptic Gospel of the Egyptians, Allogenes, and Zostrianos. The Sethian mythology in these texts is essentially a prologue to the book of Genesis. While Genesis says that one supreme God created the universe, the Gnostics say that this being was merely an evil lesser being named Yaldabaoth, or Saklos, which means fool. The truly supreme God is an unknown, unnameable God who, through a series of emanations, or spontaneously expanding his essence, created a series of celestial beings called eons and archons, one of which being Saklos, the evil creator god. This is why Judas says, "You have come from the immortal realm of Barbelo, and he who sent you, I am not worthy to proclaim his name." Judas here is talking about the supreme God, the unknown God who he can't even name. And Barbelo is one of the first celestial beings that emanated from the supreme God. So in the Gospel of Judas, the 12 disciples are worshiping Saklos, the evil creator of the world. And they mistaken Jesus to be from Saklos, when in actuality he is one of the heavenly beings like Barbelo. Later in the Gospel, Jesus describes this creation myth to Judas. Next, Saklos said to his angels, "Let us create a human being according to the likeness and according to the image." Then they formed Adam and his wife Eve. So this closely mirrors a verse from Genesis where God says, "Let us make man in our own image." But in the Gnostic version, this story is flipped on its head, with the world being created by an evil lesser god, Saklos. So Judas is special here because only he recognizes where Jesus truly comes from. And because of the secret knowledge that Judas has, many scholars assumed that the gospel is portraying Judas in a very favorable light, as opposed to the other disciples who are being portrayed as idiots. When National Geographic first published this translation, they said that Judas is portrayed as Jesus' most loyal disciple and his best friend. But many scholars have later disputed this. One reason being, Jesus refers to Judas as a demon. Judas said, "Teacher, listen to me now just as you listen to all of them, for I have a great vision." But when Jesus heard this, he laughed. He said to him, "Why are you getting worked up, 13th demon? Speak now, and I shall bear with you." Both in Greek and Coptic, the word daimon can mean either an evil demon or a neutral spirit. In the National Geographic version, they translated this verse as, "Jesus laughed and said to him, 'You 13th spirit, why do you try so hard?'" The scholar April DeConnick, an expert on Gnosticism, argues that the 13th demon is a title given to Saklos, who dwells in the 13th realm. So to call Judas the 13th demon is to call him the earthly double to the evil creator God himself. But there's a lot of debate over whether Judas is portrayed in a favorable light or an unfavorable light. But I'll include an entire bibliography on my website if you really want to delve into this yourself. But at the very least, we should be very hesitant to say that the Gospel of Judas portrays Judas as some best friend and confidant to Jesus. The text just doesn't seem to bear that out. Overall, the Gospel of Judas is a fascinating text and has greatly contributed to our understanding of Christianity in the 2nd and 3rd century. A time when even the theology of creation and God himself was still in flux.